Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto x Arachne x Crona x Medusa? Part 1. Huge shout out to Yu-Gi-Oh fan 163 for this story. If you want more awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Death City, the city which has also been known as the Oasis of the Desert. And the city that was founded by Death himself. A city that has also been known to have the Death Weapon Meister Academy, where young children can go to learn if they are a Meister or a weapon. Let me explain how this certain school works. This is an academy where children go to learn on whether or not they are Meisters or weapons. Then later, two children who are identified as official weapon and Meister are partnered, and need each other to work towards their goal. The goal I'm referring to is the goal of creating a more peaceful world. The two partners need to acquire a total amount of 99 evil human souls, and one witch soul. Evil humans were once human, but they threw their humanity away and became corrupted with evil. This transformed them into creatures that hungered for innocent souls. Witches are powerful beings that are the natural enemies of the academy. Their souls are extremely hard to acquire, and many Meisters and weapons have fallen trying to obtain the final piece needed for their goal, the Death Scythe. The Death Scythe is a powerful rank for a weapon once all needed souls are gathered. Once a weapon has obtained all these souls, they become a weapon that Lord Death himself is able to wield. Now that we have reviewed the basics of what the Academy stands for, let's take a look at one of the most dangerous witches in the entire city. We now find ourselves in the nurse's office of the Academy. Here, we see a woman with a fairly average physical build, and a large, black, dotted snake tattoo winding down either arm. Her facial features consist of eyes containing yellow irises with black pupils, and blonde hair arranged in a spike style, with two long strands extending downwards framing either side of her face, that entwine each other like a caduceus snake to rest upon her chest. Her outfit was a black body-length suit with hood, which extended downward to her knees. The hood itself was adorned with an eye-like marking upon either side. She also appeared to have a tail in the shape of an arrow. She was barefoot and had black toenail and fingernail polish that featured yellow arrows pointing upwards. This woman was Medusa Gorgon. Medusa looked down at the bundle in her arms with a smile. She was happy for two things. The first was she was now holding her new baby girl, who had a small mop of pink hair on her newborn head. The second was that no one was in the academy when she came back after giving birth, which is the reason she's clad in her witch attire. She looked down at her baby girl and smiled a beautiful smile that showed her joy at her baby girl. She had gotten pregnant due to her attempts at creating a new form of magic. This resulted in producing a child through asexual reproduction. She was rushed to the hospital where only witches go to, and the result was a success. Even though her girl had a different hair color, that didn't bother her. If one saw this, they would wonder why Medusa had a sudden change in character. Let's take a look precisely 9 months ago. Flashback. Medusa leaned on the wall as the witch mass, gathering of witches across the city, ended. She turned around and was about to head out, but was stopped by a small figure landing in front of her. She had a diminutive frame that was obscured by her domineering clothes. Her attire was comprised of a black robe and a similarly dark cloak, the majority of it adorned with various elongated safety pins, with the only exception being her distinctive white hat, which was fashioned in such a manner as to depict a sharp-toothed grinned face. The small gap between the brim of the hat and her cloak displayed tufts of gray hair and a bandage with one half written on it covering her left eye. This was the witch queen Maba. "Is there something you want?" asked Medusa, who didn't see why this witch is keeping her from leaving. Maba looked up at Medusa with her one and calmly replied with her one-word answer. "Nyama." Medusa arched an eyebrow at the answer. "Future? I am not worried about the future," replied Medusa. Maba shook her head no and walked past Medusa before looking at her and nodding to her direction. Medusa internally sighed and begrudgingly followed the queen witch. Medusa didn't know why the witch queen wanted her to follow, but figured it couldn't hurt for a moment. Maba soon led them to a small room that was decorated with various items that ranged from potion ingredients to mere ornaments that had a witch theme. Maba walked over to a clothed table with a crystal ball on it, and sat behind it to where she was now facing Medusa. She gestured to the chair opposite her for Medusa to sit. Medusa sighed and sat in the chair while Maba looked at the crystal ball. She brought up her hands to the orb and seemed to murmur something incoherent as the crystal ball began to gain a faint glow to it. She looked away from the crystal ball and looked at Medusa. Nyama, you want me to look into the crystal ball? Fine. Relented Medusa, who would get the hell out of here as soon as this was over. She looked into the crystal ball and saw a cloud of smoke beginning to form before an image began to appear. Medusa could see an image of herself as she was sitting on a broom. She appeared to be near what appeared to be a church by the looks of it. She seemed to be chanting something before the image changed to the inside of the church. She could see a young girl with a scythe fighting against what appeared to be a girl with pink hair. This didn't pique her interest until she saw something in the pink-haired girl's eyes. It looked like fear. As though she was scared something was about to get her. As the fight continued, she saw Stein, one of the teachers of the academy, appear and began to fight the girl. Stein began to win, but was interrupted as herself and the image attacked him. She looked at Maba with an uninterested look. Maba just nodded to the crystal ball with her covered head for them to continue. Medusa just sighed and looked back as the image changed. The scene soon changed to show herself facing off against Stein with either side relenting. This interested her as it showed how skilled Stein was. As they were fighting, she heard Stein ask something about that kid, the pink-haired one. Her other self replied by saying it was hers. That definitely got her interested as she listened very carefully. As she heard Stein and herself talk about what would happen to the child, she felt disgusted to hear herself say she would throw the child away. Is that something she would truly do? It seemed the crystal ball read her thoughts as the image soon changed to herself standing next to what appeared to be the younger version of the child. She stared at the image with unmoving eyes as herself seemed to not care one bit about the young child. It made her cringe as she saw the child being locked in a dark room because she wouldn't harm a small creature. The image from the crystal ball faded and Maba turned to Medusa to see her reaction. Medusa gripped her knees as tears began to make their way down. Is that what she would become in the future? A cold monster who wouldn't even care for her own child. The image sickened her to the deepest pit of her stomach. The fact she went undercover at the school for the sole purpose of her crazy plan seemed to vanish as she cried. Maba stood up from behind the table and walked over to Medusa and patted her on the back. It seemed to slowly work as Medusa wiped the tears away and turned to the Queen Witch, then did something that would shock anyone watching. She wrapped her arms around Maba and hugged her. Maba stood there and let Medusa do what she was doing and saw her pull back and stand up and walk towards the door. Before she completely left, Medusa looked over her shoulder to Maba and said, "I'm sorry for everything," before walking out of the room. Little did she know that she would be in for a surprise 9 months later. Maba nodded and turned to the crystal ball to see another image play out. This one showed Medusa smiling as she held her daughter in one arm, while her other one was occupied by a baby boy with blonde hair. Flashback end. Medusa smiled at the memory and looked down at her little girl. Don't worry, Crona. From now, I will protect you with my life. I won't be heartless and deny you the love you deserve," replied Medusa, leaning down and planting a soft kiss on her baby girl's forehead. She was about to open up her suit so Crona could have her first meal, but stopped as she heard something. By the sound of it, it sounded like crying. She closed her suit and held Crona close and carefully peered out of the door to see what was out here. She looked down the halls, but didn't see anything. She would have closed the door, but stopped as she looked down and was shocked to see a basket with a baby in it. The baby appeared to have spiky blonde hair brighter than her own, with sky blue eyes. He also seemed to have 3 whisker marks on each of his cheeks, making him all the more cuter. He also had a note attached to the blanket he was wrapped in. She reached down and pulled the note to her eye level and began reading. "To the person who finds this child, I humbly and ask you to help raise this child with love and compassion. His name is Naruto, and he is also the hero of my village. You see, the village from where we're from is known as Konoha, or also known as the village hidden in the leaves. I am the 3rd Hokage, and the reason the boy is here is because on the day he was born, a great tragedy occurred. The legendary QB attacked our village and caused massive destruction. Our great leader, the 4th Hokage, had no other choice but to seal the beast within this child, who is also his son. As the Hokage, he couldn't ask another family to give up their child, which is why he had no other choice. This boy is sent here because even though the 4th wanted his son to be seen as a hero, I know the villagers will take their anger out on the boy and make his life a living hell. So I please ask you, whoever you are, to raise this child with love and care. But you will be able to tell him who he really is when he comes of age. Signed, Sarutobi Hiruzen aka the third Hokage. Medusa stared at the note, and then at the young baby with shock. This child was a container of a great demon. Just the thought of the heavy burden he would carry would be even too much for her. She looked at the baby boy and saw him open his eyes, revealing their blue color that seemed to make you really take notice. She smiled as his little hands reached up towards her, as he seemed to recognize her as his mama. She took both babies inside and brought them over to a crib she had made when she found out she was pregnant with Crona. She put Crona in first and smiled at Naruto before giving him a kiss on the forehead and putting him next to his new sister. Both children smiled at their mother and seemed to hold each other as they began to doze off. Medusa stood there and stared at her children as she let those words ring in her mind. Her children. She had seen the monster she would have been thanks to Maba, but she would never be like that, ever. She would protect her children with her life and make sure they never felt unloved as long as she lived. She gave them one last love-filled smile before turning the lights off to let them rest. Sunlight poured through the curtains as they lit up the room where Medusa was currently sleeping. She began to stir with the sunlight getting in her eyes and begrudgingly got up and stretched her arms before getting out of bed. She went into the room where the children were and looked into the crib. She saw both of them soundly asleep with their tiny hands holding each other. Medusa smiled and carefully picked them up. It seemed to wake them up as their eyes were opening and looking up at their mom. Medusa took a seated chair in the room and unlatched her black lacy bra to let her breasts out. She brought Crona and Naruto up to them and let them begin to have their first taste of her milk. Medusa enjoyed this moment as it truly made her feel happy to have her kids to nurture. She noticed something with Naruto as he seemed to be squirming a little bit in her arm. "What's wrong, Naruto?" Naruto began to whimper as a red glow began to appear on his stomach. Medusa's eyes widened as it seemed to cover him entirely, and began to spread to her and Crona like a cloak. She could feel the energy had a dark feel to it and stood back up, but began to feel weak and laid on the floor with Crona and Naruto in her arms as darkness consumed her. Naruto's mindscape. Medusa slowly began to open her eyes as she could feel her feet submerged in water. She carefully stood up and saw that she was clad in her regular attire. She could feel something in her arm and looked down to see Crona, who was currently asleep. Medusa was relieved to see her little girl all right, but where was Naruto? Panic began to seep in as she finally took notice of her surroundings. Instead of the comfy room for her children to sleep in, they were now in what appeared to be a dark hallway with water on the floor. She held Crona with both her arms and had no other option but to start walking down the hall to find Naruto. As she continued down the seemingly endless hall, she began to see a glowing red light from around the corner ahead of them. She quickened her pace and turned, only for her eyes to widen. She saw a giant gate that had a paper on it. That was a minor thing compared to the other thing that shocked her. She could see a giant face of a fox behind the bars as they stared down at something on the floor in front of the doors. It was Naruto who seemed to be asleep. Forgetting the size of the creature, she quickly dashed to Naruto. The giant fox seemed to give a slight grin as a tendril of the red energy slipped through the bars and went closer to Naruto. Medusa held out her one arm that wasn't occupied and sent a storm of vector arrows at the tendril, and ended up shredding it to nothing as the large fox turned to see Medusa give him a glare that would make all men shiver in fear. "Stay away from my son!" exclaimed Medusa, who used a small vector arrow below Naruto, and picked him up as the arrow sent him flying into her waiting arm. Medusa smiled down at seeing her son okay and turned to walk away, but stopped as she heard a deep chuckle behind her. She turned to see the giant fox chuckling for some reason, which unnerved her as her fury disappeared when she realized how big of a disadvantage she was in, even with the fox being caged up. "Well, this is something I never expected to see. My new container being the son of a witch," came the fox's response. Medusa would have loved to get out of there to keep her children safe, but the fox said something that sparked her interest. "What do you mean, container?" Medusa asked before the words from the letters she read before came to her. "You're the QB," muttered Medusa with widened eyes. The QB merely smirked before chuckling again. "Seems like that old monkey already explained in his note about what happened. For one thing, the name's Kurama. The second is I didn't intend to attack that village. I was being manipulated by a man known as Madara Uchiha, but I highly doubt he was who he said he was. He had a different feel to him. I know this because the real Madara used me against his rival, Hashirama Senju, in a battle that went down in history. I was then sealed in the wife of Hashirama, Mito Uzumaki, and then would later be sealed in the body of Kushina Uzumaki, the brat's real mother. Finished Kurama, shocking Medusa. Medusa looked down at Naruto and was surprised to see the young boy giggling, as though he had no worries in the world. What now? Asked Medusa to Kurama. The giant fox was confused by her question. What do you mean, what now? Asked Kurama. I mean, are you going to try and take over him when he grows up? Asked Medusa, who kept a strong glare focused on the fox. Kurama looked at her before chuckling before it soon turned into a full-blown laugh. He stopped himself long enough to respond. No, I will admit it sounds tempting, but if you would be willing, I think we could both benefit from a proposition I have, replied Kurama. And what would this proposition be exactly? Asked Medusa. Simple. I merely wish to help train the boy in using my powers when he's old enough. My past containers could wield only a certain amount, but I wish for something more. I know I'm trapped in here till he dies, but I wish to be able to hold my head up high if he can use my powers to the best of their abilities. Finished Kurama. How would that satisfy me at all? Asked Medusa, who didn't see the point. Because if you accept this request, I will perform a blood ritual on the boy. This will allow him to officially have your DNA in him, truly making him your child. And since you can use magic, he would gain the ability to use it as well. Add in how strong he could be using my powers and magic, would mean he would be a powerful individual. Finished Kurama. Medusa thought about the idea. On one hand, she could raise her son and daughter oblivious to the cruel world and what happens to those with magical abilities. But another part of her knew that idea was stupid as it could blow up in her face. Plus, if she did help her son and daughter train in magic, she wouldn't have to worry about them being in danger. She turned to Kurama with a dedicated look in her eyes. I accept. You can train Naruto when he's older, and I will train them both in magic, provided Naruto will be safe, replied Medusa. Kurama chuckled before replying. Don't worry, the training will be hard, but it won't kill him or be traumatizing. Well, it may, but it will help him become stronger, replied Kurama, reassuring the mother. Medusa nodded and smiled down at her children. She looked up to see the floor had what looked like a large circle with numerous symbols on different parts of it. Merely put the boy in the center of the circle, then make a tiny cut on his finger. Do the same to your finger, then make sure a drop of your blood lands on his cut. I'll handle the rest, replied Kurama. Medusa nodded and walked over to the center and carefully put Naruto down. She put Crona to her side and used a tiny vector arrow to make the cut on her finger and Naruto's. This caused him to start crying, but Medusa calmly rubbed his cheeks to calm him down. She left a single drop from her finger onto his and watched as the circle they were in began to glow. Medusa could feel herself getting weak and tried to stay awake, but began to black out. Before she did though, she heard Kurama say one more thing. I think you'll like the improvements. Real world. Medusa's eyes opened as she took in her surroundings and saw she was back in the room. She looked down to see Naruto and Crona sound asleep, which was good. She looked at Naruto and saw two canine fangs slightly peek out from his lips and saw his blonde hair seem to tone down a little to where it looked like a shade of blonde between his original and her own. She held them close to her and headed out the room to get dressed. After getting back into her nurse's outfit, she headed over to her desk, but didn't see the pen on the floor where she was about to step, and soon found herself falling on her back. Luckily, she had put Crona and Naruto on one of the beds of the patients. The bad news for this was a glass container filled with a black substance that wobbled near the edge before falling and shattering. Medusa let out a frustrated sigh at the mess her container of black blood made on the floor and made to go, and grabbed one of the towels from the cabinet, but stopped as the substance began to bubble and seemed to twitch. She took a careful stance and watched as it seemed to move until a small portion popped up above it like a tiny head. It looked around before setting its sights on something. She turned to look and saw it was looking at her children. She saw it was already halfway to them and couldn't risk sending a vector arrow as it could hit her children. The black blood climbed up the bed and slid between the two kids before it split in two and covered their bodies in itself. She watched in stunned silence as the black blood seemed to seep through the blankets and their skin. She took a cautious step, but stopped when she heard a voice. No need to worry about them. The black blood simply detected the power in their bodies and became part of them. If you're wondering how I know what it is, I was able to see what that stuff was when you were in here. Also, when you and your daughter were in here, you both inherited a small part of my power, which will help you later on. Your daughter will be able to use the black blood with ease when she's older," responded Kurama from her head. Medusa let out a sigh of relief and smiled that her kids were all right. Suddenly, another thought came to her. "I'm curious. When I saw you, some of your energy was reaching towards Naruto. Why?" asked Medusa in thought. "I wanted to see how much you cared for the boy. I figured you would look at him like a demon just because he had me in him," replied Kurama. "Don't worry. I made a promise that I would give my kids the love they needed, and I intend to live up to it for the rest of my life," thought Medusa with determination. She turned to her children and smiled at them. She walked over to the bed and carefully picked them up and gave a kiss to both of their foreheads. "Don't worry, you two. Ka-san will always love you." Medusa could tell they both were very tired and decided to lie down on the bed with them and let herself go off to dreamland. Low Village, in this town known for making golems, is where we find a particular one. The oldest golem, who was actually the first ever golem ever made. We currently see the golem wandering through the forests outside the village as it did not have any emotions or soul to act on anything. Nothing but the commands given to it by its creator. It suddenly stopped where it was as something was happening to it. A small spider crawled on it, and was followed by several more. Soon, the entire golem's side seemed to have them as they all raced down the golem, and seemed to converge together on the spot before they grew and began to take shape. The figure was soon revealed to be a woman with extremely pale and flawless complexion that made it appear as though she was constructed entirely out of porcelain. She had a curvy figure, with very large breasts, a thin waist and wide hips. Her facial features comprise of long dark black hair, worn in an upwards manner with two long strands that frame either side of her face, and eyes that have both completely gray irises and pupils, each containing a black spider web pattern. Her typical clothing consisted simply out of a long black sleeveless dress. However, this dress was incredibly long, that it completely concealed her feet, while ending in 8 small trailing pieces of fabric like the legs of a spider. A narrow black band encircled her neck featuring a small spider emblem that lied at its front and 8 extensions that protruded outwards upon the back, with 4 emerging from either side. Spiderweb netting branches the gap between the band and the dress, extending downwards from the aforementioned spider emblem. 2 large sleeves, separated entirely from the dress, were worn on her arms, ending just after her elbows. Each of these also displayed 4 protrusions, appearing at the ends of the significant amount of overhanging fabric. She also wore 2 spider earrings that hung downwards from her ears. She also held a rather large black folding fan in her right hand. This was the witch and mother of all demon weapons, Arachne. Arachne had no idea why she reformed herself here. She was resting for the past years, but woke up. Something had come into the world, and it held a lot of power. More power than herself even. She heard the sound of something landing behind her, and turned to see the Queen Witch Maba stand there with a crystal ball held in her hand. "Maba, to what do I owe the honor of your presence?" asked Arachne. Maba merely held up the crystal ball and nodded to it before saying "Nyama." "The future?" responded Arachne with mild interest. "A little fortune-telling wouldn't hurt considering how long she was asleep for." Medusa was currently reading from one of her medical books as she let her 2 children sleep. They both were holding each other to get to sleep, which made for an adorable image. As she continued to browse through the writing, she noticed something out of the corner of her eye. She put her book down and saw a small spider on her desk. She rolled up the book and was about to crush it, but stopped when a glowing purple trail seemed to be coming from the spider as it moved around her desk, creating some message. She watched in silence as the spider stopped and a message was written out on her desk with what appeared to be purple threading. It read, "Medusa, please come to this location. I wish to talk to you." Signed, Arachne. Medusa stared wide-eyed at the message. Arachne? Her sister? This sounded too crazy to be true. She took a seat in her chair and rubbed her chin in thought as she went through possible scenarios in her head. The last time she had seen her sister was around 800 years ago, when she abandoned her to be killed by Lord Death. She couldn't possibly want to make amends when it was technically her that nearly got her killed. Perhaps she was trying to lure her into a trap as revenge. She wouldn't put it past her sister, as she could manipulate anyone with ease. Plus, just sending her a message to meet her at a certain location seemed too risky as anyone could intercept the message and find her. This wasn't like her sister at all. She kept rethinking all the info she had and could only make one logical reason stand out. Someone may be making her say this. Arachne was a proud woman who truly was only scared of Lord Death, but that was a long time ago. Still, she was someone that wasn't easily scared. She stood up and decided on what to do. She would go there and see what was going on. If it turns out Arachne was just luring her there for an ambush, then she would get out of there as soon as possible, as risking her life when her children weren't even 1 year old was something she couldn't risk. She walked over to the cabinet and whispered a spell under her breath and stood back as the cabinet seemed to transform into numerous cubes that folded into each other before revealing her hidden storage. She went in and found the broom she used to travel and left her storage, but made sure it was hidden again. She was about to head out the window and head out to the coordinates, but stopped when she heard her children crying. She mentally slapped herself at her own stupidity. She couldn't leave them here by themselves. If somebody came by and saw them, she would have a hard time explaining they were hers. She walked over to them and picked them up so she had one arm around each. Don't worry, you two. I won't be gone long. Medusa gave both of them a kiss on the forehead and put them back in the crib. She closed her eyes as the tattoos on her arms slithered down and stood up to show her serpent familiars. I want you two to keep an eye on my children. If anyone comes in here, make sure they leave immediately. Just make sure they don't see my children, commanded Medusa to her serpents. The two of them nodded and get into positions around the crib as their mistress flew through the air on her broom. Low village. Medusa slowly began her descent as she got off her broom and surveyed her area. It was merely a small opening in the middle of the forest that surrounded the town. I see you got my message, came a voice she knew all too well as she saw Arachne emerge from behind a tree with her fan clutched in her hand. Medusa kept a straight face as she faced her sister. It's been a while, Arachne, replied Medusa, putting on a good act of being her old self. Arachne didn't smile or show any emotion on her face. It actually looked to be devoid of emotion to Medusa. She was about to ask why she called her there, but stopped herself when she saw something on Arachne's face. It didn't seem to be anything, until she saw it falling down her face from her eyes. She stared in shock as she watched her sister begin to cry. Arachne had tried to keep up her facade, but couldn't control her tears from coming out, which resulted in all the emotions inside to come flooding out. She fell to her knees as she supported herself by placing her palms against the ground. She let the tears drip from her face, but suddenly felt a pair of arms wrap around her. She looked up and saw her own sister holding her with a sad frown. What's happened? Asked Medusa. Arachne looked down before looking back up at Medusa. I've seen what kind of person I truly am, whispered Arachne. Medusa seemed confused by this. She stood up and held Arachne by her shoulders to keep her standing. Arachne, what do you mean? Asked Medusa. Arachne had calmed down enough to explain. It happened when I first woke up. I sensed a powerful force that caught my attention. When I came to here, Maba said she had something to show me. She then showed me what I was going to do in the future. I don't usually feel guilt, but seeing myself do all those terrible things was too much. Arachne let more fresh tears fall from her face as she looked down. Medusa stared at her sister and brought her close to her body in a hug. Arachne looked at Medusa from where her head was and let her sadness out as she cried on her sister's shoulder. Medusa calmly patted her back to soothe her. To tell you the truth, I've had my future shown to me as well by Maba. I saw myself depriving my own child of love and tried to turn her into a weapon. 9 months later, I was pregnant with my baby girl. It was on that day she was born that I swore I would never become that monster and give her all the love she needed, replied Medusa. Arachne brought her head up and stared at Medusa in shock at hearing her mention she had a child. Soon, I found another baby that had a terrible burden placed on him. I decided I would take care of him as well, and now I have 2 lovely children, finished Medusa, smiling. It was by this time that Arachne had stopped crying and was standing in front of Medusa. Now, since you're done, I think it's my turn. Arachne, I'm sorry for what I did to you all those years ago, leaving you to death like that. I sincerely want us to mend our ways so we don't end up like our future counterparts, replied Medusa. Arachne was stunned by this. She felt touched that her sister wanted to mend ways and nodded to show she forgave her. Medusa gave her a smile and gave her a brief hug before separating. Now that the pleasantries are out of the way, where are my niece and nephew? asked Arachne, who felt giddy to see the little ones. Well, I could use a spell to get us there, but it could alert many meisters. Perhaps if she was cut from her sentence, as their attention was turned to something else. Namely, a flock of ravens that sprung up out of nowhere and flew together in front of them. Both Gorgon's sisters stared as the flock of birds grew smaller and seemed to be swirl around a single spot as they all soon dispersed to reveal Maba standing there, but with two objects in her arms. Medusa focused and saw they were Naruto and Crona, both still sleeping. Thought I should bring the little ones, replied Maba, surprising the two witches at hearing her say a single sentence as opposed to her short ones that needed someone to translate. Thank you, Maba, replied Medusa, taking the two children into her arms as Arachne walked over and saw her niece and nephew. My, they are adorable. So, who's the father? asked Arachne. Well, Crona was created by me trying to create a new different magic, which resulted in me getting pregnant. And Naruto? Well, I'm not gonna have her do the whole explanation for what the note read, as that stuff gets annoying fast. So let's just say that this box will take place instead of the explanation instead. Arachne's eyes widened at the info Medusa just said. And that's not all. Both of them have my black blood in them, replied Medusa, looking down. Arachne was surprised by this. She looked down at the little ones and saw their eyes begin to open. All women saw them stare at Maba and Arachne for a moment before smiling and giggling. This showed the three witches that the children trusted them. Naruto towards Arachne with his little hands to show he wanted to be held by her. Medusa handed him to Arachne, who was awed by her nephew's response. Usually if children saw her, they tended to stay away, but her own nephew seemed truly happy in her arms. This sent a warm feeling through her body before both women noticed something happening. Crona seemed bothered by something as a figure suddenly seemed to appear from her back. The figure was tiny, had black skin, a big white X on its head with two white eyes with an X in each one. He also had two arms with the same black color with two white hands on them. The tiny figure turned to both women before saying, "What are you looking at, old hags?" Medusa and Arachne suddenly got angry at the statement. "Oh, did I make you mad? Too bad," replied the tiny figure, who was acting smug. Both women would have slugged him, but he appeared attached to Crona, and they couldn't take that huge risk. Crona soon began to cry from the unknown presence, who took notice of the girl. "Oi, be quiet!" exclaimed Ragnarok, who was about to slap the kid on the head, but suddenly stopped as he felt a dark presence behind him. He slowly turned, and stared in shock at the blonde-haired kid, who was giving him a glare that was filled with so much ki it wasn't funny. The witches and Ragnarok stared in shock as a red energy began to seep out of the child and soon took the form of an angry fox's head with its teeth bared. "Eek!" screeched Ragnarok, who saw the fox's head rush towards him and bit into his shoulder, which hurt considering the black blood was very hard. He grimaced in pain and could swear he could hear a voice as the fox bit harder. "You better listen, or I'll make sure to shred you to bits. You better treat that girl nicely, or I will cause you so much pain that you will live in an endless tortured state where you are nothing more than a puppet with no emotions, got it?" "Why, yes," squeaked Ragnarok in fear before feeling the fox let up and quickly receded back into young Crona. The fox head soon disappeared and all three of them could only stare in shock at what just happened. "Medusa? Is that who you just described?" asked Arachne, trying to calm down from what just happened. Medusa could only nod as her children seemed to return to sleep once again, completely unaware of what just happened. Maba stood there as everything that just happened is what she anticipated. She had seen the future far enough to know that the obstacles ahead of all of them would get much rougher. Medusa and Arachne walked through the secret passage that would lead them to the area where the witch mass was held. In her arms were Naruto and Crona. While it's frowned upon for a witch to bring a non-witch to the meeting, her children were technically witches considering Crona was born from her, and Naruto had her DNA in him, thereby making them what some would call witches in training. Not sure if Naruto would be called that considered his gender, which would make him technically a sorcerer. As they made it to the area, they were obviously noticed by the other witches who were attending. It was well known that Medusa and Arachne used to hate each other, but had recently mended their ways. Some didn't know if this was true, while the rest were neutral about it. Medusa held her children close as she scanned the crowd and noticed two witches that stood out from the rest. Both of them were around her height, and were carrying something as well in their arms. Their features couldn't be seen as they both wore a robe for the meeting. Both figures walked over and pulled their hoods down, allowing Medusa to finally recognize them. The first woman appeared to have black hair that went down to her neck with a little patch colored pink. The second woman had long silver hair and wore black lipstick on her lips. Her face was obscured by an orange hat with a frog-like face. The first woman was Sakuya, and the other was Megumi. Sakuya was a mouse-themed witch, which meant she could use a special ability to separate herself into several small mice to either escape from battle or to spy on foes. Her family also had the ability to use lasers from certain points from their body, such as whiskers that they naturally had, or their fingers. Any point really that wasn't too big and straight enough for it to work. Megumi was a frog-themed witch that could use tadpole-shaped bombs for offensive battles. She also had the ability to send messages via small frogs to her allies without the frogs being noticed. Her most distinct ability is her ability to create a variety of different poison from her body, such as poison projectiles, or even secreting poison from her body through her pores. Medusa had learned of their names a while back and had heard good things about both of them. They possessed amazing tactics and abilities, while working together as the perfect tag team. "Hello, Medusa," greeted Megumi with a smile. She had heard of the powerful witch Medusa, and wanted to see what she was like. From the rumors, she had supposedly gone through a change of some sort. "Hello?" greeted Medusa back, who was surprised to be greeted with kindness, especially from a pair of witches she had never met before. "I know we don't know each other, but I've heard interesting things from you," replied Megumi. Sakuya shook her head as they could tell Medusa seemed to take that the wrong way. "Not in a bad way, of course. I just meant that we heard you were strong." Medusa nodded to show she understood and saw Megumi look at her children. "Are these two yours?" asked Megumi, looking at Naruto and Crona. "Why, yes," replied Medusa, glad the topic was off her. She didn't like it when people referred to when she was her old self. "They don't have a father, so I'm planning to raise them to the best of my abilities," replied Medusa, smiling at them. "Well, they're adorable," replied Megumi, wagging her finger in front of them. Both had already awoken and giggled at the lady. "I hope so. They are my niece and nephew after all," commented Arachne, who smiled behind her fan at the look Megumi and Sakuya gave her. They had finally noticed her after walking over. Medusa smiled and noticed the bundle moving in Megumi's arm. "I'm guessing that's your baby?" questioned Medusa. "Why, yes. I had her a few days ago," replied Megumi, showing Medusa and Arachne her little girl. She had a small amount of silver hair like her mother growing on her head and had 2 black dots on the corners of her cheeks. They made her resemble a frog almost. "Her name's Iruka Frog." Medusa smiled at the name and turned to see Sakuya held a bundle in her arms. She showed Medusa a young girl about Iruka's age with a mop of pink hair on her head. She also had slight marks on her cheeks that showed the signs of whiskers beginning to come in. "Who's this little one?" asked Arachne. Sakuya didn't say anything but nodded towards Megumi. "You'll have to excuse her. She's mainly the strong silent type," replied Megumi. "Her daughter's name is Mizun," replied Megumi. "Mizun? Wait, I thought the Mizun family were known to have multiple children, like mice?" questioned Medusa. "It's true, but not in this case. When Sakuya was pregnant, it turned out that instead of facing several children, all of the kids in her womb had magically fused to become one. The doctors were stunned, but thankfully she's healthy from it," replied Megumi. This was surprising to the 2 witches, as the Mizun family were a famous mouse-themed clan that dated back hundreds of years ago. They usually had several children at a time like a mouse. "So Arachne, any kids in your life?" asked Megumi. "None for me at the moment. Right now I'll just help keep watch over little Naruto and Crona," replied Arachne. Both women nodded in understanding and noticed something going on. They saw young Naruto beginning to glow a reddish color and watched in stunned silence as 2 tendrils of the red energy stretched from him and seemed to cover Iruka and Mizun. Megumi and Sakuya didn't do anything as the energy seemed to assure them that everything was alright. They also saw a black stream come through the tendrils and seemed to go into Iruka and Mizun by being absorbed through their pores. Megumi stared at Medusa in shock, and Sakuya was giving her a stern glare that said, "Explain." "Don't worry. Naruto's magic is still developing, and is unpredictable. As assure you, Iruka and Mizun are fine," reassured Medusa, who only had a slight idea of what happened, but needed more time to research it. Right now she needed to make sure they didn't do any drastic measures, as she didn't want them to distrust her. "Well, this has been fun, but we should get home," replied Arachne, changing the topic. Megumi and Sakuya didn't know what to say or do after what they just saw, but to take Arachne's suggestion and keep an eye on Medusa. Medusa and Arachne left there and headed home to Baba Yaga's castle. Medusa was using her broom and kept a grip on Naruto and Crona, while Arachne used her magic to transform into a spider to hold on and to make sure the broom could support all of them. Arachne was glad she took this form as she needed to think about some things while they headed home. What Megumi asked really stuck to her. She didn't have any kids, which made her feel sad. One thing that all witches yearn for, no matter who, is to be a mother. They have been marked to be beings of destruction, which is not true. They are only marked as such, because humans and others scorn them for what they can do. But this fighting and hatred between the races never diminishes their want for a child. To raise a life instead of taking them. Arachne suddenly perked up as she remembered how Crona came to be. Medusa became pregnant with her after a failed attempt at a potion. Well, if that can happen to Medusa, then she can do the same thing. Arachne checked the vial one more time before nodding her head with satisfaction. She poured the contents into the pot and grabbed the final piece she needed. The jar she grabbed contained the leftover amount of Medusa's black blood. With this, imbued with her own magic, would be the final piece to grant her a child. A child she could care for and raise to have a happy life. After pouring the black blood into the pot, she let her hands hover over the brew as her magic covered them. She let strands of her magic slip in like threads and watched as the color changed to blue. She was satisfied with it, and didn't notice a small scorpion move across the floor before it went to the other side of the pot and transformed. Arachne jumped back and got ready for a battle, but stopped when she saw who it was. "Shala, it's been a while," commented Arachne, staring at the woman across from her. The woman in question had a pale and unblemished complexion that served to accentuate her slender facial features. Her irises looked like two interlocking scorpion stingers, which formed one complete circle located at the center of each eye. Her headscarf-covered black hair is arranged into a long loose plait that ends in the shape of a scorpion stinger, through the use of an appropriately tied bow, an aspect that was further mirrored by an ornamental earring dangling from her right ear. Her attire consisted of a long-sleeved sailor outfit that had been adopted by many Japanese schools as their standard uniform. However, this displayed the symbol of the star sign Scorpio as a small emblem, located on the visible portion of her vest beneath her sailor collar. This collar had two stripes running across it, one that goes along its entirety and another that terminated partway across the front. This was Shala Gorgon, youngest sibling of the Gorgon siblings. She had heard what had happened to Medusa, and was intrigued to hear that she had a niece and nephew. She decided to visit Arachne to get more info, as Medusa may be a little anxious if she came near her children. Arachne became cautious at Shala's presence. She may be the youngest out of them, but she tended to do experiments like Medusa used to, which meant she could still be up to something. "Hello Arachne, it's been years since we last talked," commented Shala, taking a peek into the pot. "What are you making? What I'm doing is none of your concern," replied Arachne with a cold tone. "Really? 'Cause I can tell that the ingredients put in here are part of a special potion to help witches conceive a child. Feeling lonely, are we?" mocked Shala. Arachne was close to striking down her young sister, but stopped when Shala mentioned Medusa. "You know what I heard? I heard that our sister has her own children, a boy and a girl. I'm so happy to be an aunt," replied Shala with a tone to her voice that sounded sincere, but Arachne knew that she was merely acting. "What are your real intentions?" asked Arachne, who was ready to crush her own sister if she threatened her niece and nephew. Shala grinned before turning her back to Arachne. "I just want to see how strong they are is all. See you around." Shala glowed before returning to her scorpion form and disappeared into the shadows. Arachne sighed and knew she had to keep an eye out now that Shala seemed to get involved. She returned to the brew and was satisfied to see it was ready. She took a small vial and gathered a small amount in it. She grabbed a syringe from her table and sucked up the contents of the vial into the needle. She parted her dress to the side and injected the serum into her abdomen. The brew would seep through her pores and then gather in her womb. This would then result in her getting pregnant with her own child. She made sure the rest of the brew was destroyed as she didn't want anyone, especially Shala, to use it to their advantage. She went back up the stairs while rubbing her belly. "Wait till your cousins meet you, little one," Arachne felt joy at what was to come as she decided to keep this a secret until she saw Medusa again. 5 years later, we now see a small playground in the middle of the witch's realm as several small figures were seen playing in the sandbox. One of them was young Naruto. His blonde hair spiked up and had a similar tone to it, similar to his mother Medusa. He wore a black t-shirt that had the image of red flames that were in the shape of a fox head. He wore a pair of tan shorts and had a necklace that had a small skull charm on it that looked similar to a fox. The girl next to him was his sister Crona. She had pink hair that was quite short, with several long, large clumps sticking out in several places. The bangs were straight cut and ended above the eyebrows. 2 long pieces of hair extend from the bangs and hang low over Crona's face. He also didn't have any footwear, something he inherited from his mother. She wore a black knee-high dress. The dress had a rugged cutout at the bottom, laced with several white diamonds. It also had a white collar and cuffs. Both siblings were busy building a sand castle and heard the cry of someone getting closer. They turned to see a gray blur rush by them and accidentally tripped on their castle. Both siblings weren't worried as they could rebuild it and turned to the blur, which turned out to be a girl. She had long silvery hair and had a prominent black circle at the corners of her mouth, and wore a gray dress that had tadpoles on it. "Naru-chan!" cried the girl who glomped onto Naruto. This was Iruka Frog, Megumi's daughter, who had been friends with the 2 siblings since they began to walk. She also got used to glomping onto Naruto like that, which became her signature greeting. Naruto smiled at seeing their friend while Crona noticed something hopping towards them. It was a tadpole that looked slightly larger than a frog. This was Iruka's familiar known as Otama Jackson. On top of said familiar's head was a small mouse that jumped off and ran up Crona's outstretched hand. "Hello, Mizun," greeted Crona as she put the mouse down and watched as it transformed into a girl their age. She had short pink hair that framed her face perfectly and had small whiskers on her face. She wore a simple white dress that had 2 black lines going down the side. She nodded to Crona and both watched as Naruto pulled Iruka off him to properly say hello. "Hey, where's Doku and I?" asked Naruto, looking around for their cousin. Crona saw a figure near the trees and turned to her brother. "Oniai-chan, over there," replied Crona, pointing at the figure. Naruto turned and smiled as their cousin hid behind the tree. "Come on, Doku and I," called Naruto. The figure slowly crept out of the shadows to reveal a girl that was a few inches taller than Naruto, but still the same age. She had long black hair that was a similar shade to Arachne. She had red eyes and a small fang poking out from the left side of her face. She wore a lavender-colored kimono. This was Dokurin, daughter to Arachne and cousin to Naruto and Crona. What took Arachne by surprise after injecting herself with that potion was that she ended up pregnant much sooner than she thought. It seemed her magic combined with the black blood sped up the process and managed to knock her up as soon as possible, which led to her giving birth to Dokurin. Dokurin was raised to have polite manners as Arachne wanted her to be calm and composed. Of course, she also gained a shy nature from the lessons, which seemed to be more apparent whenever she played with Naruto and Crona. Naruto ran over to his cousin and grabbed her hand before dragging her to the sandbox. "Come on, Doku and I. It's fun to play in the sand." Dokurin looked down to keep the blush on her face from being seen by her cousin as he dragged her to join them. Iruka and Mizun had started to help with their sand castle and had added even a tiny statue garden of frogs and mice. On a bench that overlooked the children playing is where we find Medusa and Arachne sitting down and watching the children play. Megumi and Sakuya were letting the 2 of them watch over Iruka and Mizun while they were running an errand for Maba. "I still can't believe you went and had Dokurin," commented Medusa with a smile. Someone was feeling jealous, teased Medusa. Arachne ignored her teasing and smiled as she saw her daughter play with the others. "Maybe so, but can you blame me?" questioned Arachne. "No, just saying," replied Medusa, who understood what Arachne was getting at. Naruto smiled at their finished castle, but felt something land on his head. He looked up and was looking into the face of a purple cat that wore a large hat on its head. "Naya," chimed the cat before hopping off Naruto. Mizun narrowed her eyes at the sight of the cat, but didn't make a move as it didn't do anything but appear. Crona tilted her head and began to pet the cat, which she gladly enjoyed. "Who do you think she belongs to, Oniai-chan?" asked Crona. "Hey, I'm my own person. I belong to no one," came a new female voice as they all turned and looked at the cat. "That was me, by the way. Eh?" came Iruka's surprised response at hearing the cat talk. Naruto though smiled and held her up. Cool. I've never met a talking cat before. What's your name? Asked Naruto. Blair, and it looks like I'm not the only one coming by, replied Blair, who saw another girl coming towards them. Naruto and the rest looked at the new girl as she walked over. She had brown hair, pink eyes, and had a black dress with a white underdress and had red ribbons. She also had white gloves and a hat that resembled a chameleon with its white eyes and long tongue. Hello? My name is Angela, can I play? Asked Angela with a smile. Sure thing, replied Naruto, who was always happy to have a new friend join in. Arachne and Medusa smiled as their little group got even more bigger than it already was. For the rest of the day, the kids would play on the swings, monkey bars, and even hide and seek, which was fun to watch because whenever Naruto found one of the girls, they would jump out and surprise him. He always fell for it. The only ones that didn't make him jump were Crona, Dokurin, and Mizun, but that was probably because they were more quiet. As the day grew longer, Sakuya and Megumi arrived to pick up Iruka and Mizun. Mizun gave Naruto and the others a small smile before leaving with her mother. Iruka though wanted to stay and keep playing, but Megumi promised there would be other days. Angela and Blair soon had to say goodbye, but Naruto surprised them both by giving them both a hug and said, "What do you mean goodbye? We'll see each other again." Both were touched that he strongly believed that, and said thanks for allowing them to play and went their separate ways. Medusa and Arachne said their goodbyes as well and knew that the next time they met is when they would begin their kids' training. Arachne had told Medusa how Dokurin was made with the combination of her magic and black blood, which meant that she would be able to train with her cousins as well. What Medusa had noticed, and was pretty sure Arachne noticed as well, was the magical feeling the cat was giving off, showing that she was more than what she seemed. But they decided to worry about it after they trained their kids. Medusa departed with Naruto and Crona, who held on to Naruto's arm and said that she didn't want to get lost, which got a chuckle out of Naruto, who allowed it. Arachne smiled at the siblings' bond, but noticed Dokurin clench her hands as the three of them headed home. Is everything alright, dear? Dokurin turned away with an embarrassed look on her face. Arachne, however, crouched down and turned her face so she could look at her. Dear, if something is bothering you, please let me know. Dokurin knew she couldn't lie and let out a sigh before replying. Kao-san, do you think Naru and I will make me his bride? Arachne was taken back by the question, but smiled at the supposed crush her daughter had on her cousin. Well, you never know unless you try. If you want him to make you his bride, you will need to work extra hard, replied Arachne, who knew this would help motivate her for when she starts her training, but had no idea it would really push herself to be Naruto's bride. I'll do it, replied Dokurin as they began to make their way home. Just you wait, Naru and I'll be the best bride you deserve, thought Dokurin. That thought alone caused several females to feel shiver go up their spines, like there was going to be a certain trouble in the near future. Hey people. Just to let you know that the best way to know what Dokurin looks like is imagine a spider girl from the game Monster Girl Quest, except with black hair and wearing a lavender kimono. Now this chapter will have some stuff to get the story going, so hopefully it's enough. Also, I plan to have Angela be around the same age as Naruto and the others as the story goes by. Also, here's a list of what age Naruto and the others are so it's not confusing. Naruto 9, Crona 9, Iruka 9, Mizun 9, Dokurin 9, Angela 8. And before you say that the ages are wrong, let me remind you that Crona was born on the same day Naruto was found, which is close to them being born on the same day. Iruka and Mizun were born a mere few days later, which means they're still in the same age range. So hopefully we don't have a problem with the ages. For Medusa and the others, considering Arachne is 800 years old, she is a natural-born model, so no complaints about not putting up their ages. Also, I get that 4 years seems a while for their training, but Medusa and the others wanted to let them have a childhood before everything became serious. Time skip 4 years. Today was the day that Naruto, Crona, and their friends had been waiting for today to come after all these years. Naruto stood up straight with his sister Crona next to him, and their cousin Dokurin right next to her. Then it went on with Iruka and Mizun as they waited for their training to begin. Medusa, Arachne, Sakuya, and Megumi stood together as they waited for Medusa to start things off. After all, she did invent the same stuff that was inside each one of them. A raven flew down next to Medusa before its shape changed and grew until Maba stood there. Maba-sama, what are you doing here? Asked Megumi, who was surprised to see the Witch Queen show up all of a sudden. I came to watch. It's not every day we have an event like this, replied Maba. Medusa nodded her head to show she understood, and turned to the kids. Medusa stood in front of them and cleared her throat before talking. Alright, today is the day we begin your training with black blood. This is something that hasn't been done before, but that's why me and the others are here, to make sure everything goes fine. To begin, you all need to understand the black blood. It was created for the purpose of infecting the soul with madness. But this training will keep your mind focused so you don't lose your mind. It can also heal wounds, solidify into weapons, and harden to where your body is protected. But remember this, if you push your body far beyond what it can take of the black blood's madness, you can easily lose yourself and cause who knows what. Now I want you all to close your eyes and concentrate on the black blood flowing through your veins. Crona's blood is all black blood, and Dokurin as well. The rest of you have around 50% black blood and 50% regular blood, which means you'll need to really focus in order to feel it. Each one of them closed their eyes and concentrated. A few minutes went by before a form could be seen emerging from Crona's back. It was a figure that had what appeared to be white circles instead of hands. It also had several spikes on its back and a giant white X on its faces where the nose would be, with large ping-pong ball-like eyes with excess for pupils. It also seemed to have some slight muscle on its small form. Medusa and Arachne smiled and held back their giggling from Ragnarok's chibi form while Sakuya and Megumi were confused. Medusa told them that was Crona's demon weapon that was melted into her black blood. Hey, what's the big idea of calling me out here? Demanded Ragnarok, who saw the odd looks he was receiving. He was about to cuss them out, but stopped when he turned to Naruto and suddenly began to sweat as the boy gave him the same look he received after he was melded with Crona. He could practically feel the foxes stare at him through his eyes and quickly shut up. Ragnarok, weapon form. Came Crona's order as Ragnarok nodded his head and his shape melted down before it extended and changed into a large black Scandinavian broadsword with a grey hilt, a white stripe down the middle and spikes around the guard which resembled those on Ragnarok's body. Good job, Crona. Now Dokurin, I want you to do just what she did, said Medusa. All right, replied Dokurin. She closed her eyes again and held out her hands. Soon the black blood came out and began to take shape into two melee weapons. They were circular and black, with silver spikes and circles around the edges, and two black handles shaped in a cross in the middle. Both of them had 8 spikes. Axel's chakrams from Kingdom Hearts except black instead of red. Excellent work, Dokurin, commented Arachne, proud to see her daughter pull it off without trouble. Thank you, Ka-san. You're next, Naruto, replied Medusa. Naruto nodded and closed his eyes. He focused and could feel the black blood in his veins, but he also felt a strange power inside as well. It was strong, but it seemed to be helping him out. He held out his hand as the black blood formed into his weapon. He opened his eyes and saw that he was holding a massive broadsword shaped like a giant butcher knife that had a circle close to the top and a semicircular one near the handle. It also had a long handle that required the use of 2 hands. Zabuza's Kubikirabocho. Very nice, Naruto, congratulated Medusa. Naruto nodded as it was Iruka's turn. She closed her eyes and held out her hands. The black blood seeped through her pores before the blood in both her hands fused together and began to take shape. After it formed, it showed her weapon, which was a pair of nunchucks that were black-colored, but had a white stripe near the end where several spikes jutted out. Nicely done, Iruka, applauded Megumi, proud to see her daughter get it. Iruka grinned at her mother, and now it was Mizun's turn. The mouse-themed witch in training took a deep breath before letting it out and concentrated. She could feel the black blood near her wrists and held them out. The black blood seeped out through the arms and began to spread around her wrist and a little up her arms. It solidified and took the form of 2 black gauntlets that were layered with numerous spikes. Mizun turned to her mother and saw her nod her head with a small smile. Mizun smiled in return and stood at attention as Medusa walked up to them and had a hard look on her face. Thinking they did bad, they prepared themselves for a loud yelling. Medusa instantly smiled at them and hugged Naruto and Crona close to her while Arachne, Megumi, and Sakuya went to their own daughters. I'm so proud of you too, gushed Medusa holding her children. You did great, complimented Arachne. Dokurin nodded while keeping her blushing face away from Naruto. Well done, my little tadpole, replied Megumi, patting Iruka on the head, who covered her face from the embarrassing nickname. Sakuya stood in front of Mizune and nodded to her with a small smile on her face. Mizune returned the silent greeting and the two witches hugged. Alright, I think that's enough for today. We'll slowly work on how to truly tap into the Black Blood's power, and see if we can find someone to help train Naruto and Crona in sword fighting, replied Medusa as the mothers and Maba proceeded to head out. Maba, though, watched as the rest of them left and headed back home. Everything is running its course. Hopefully Naruto is strong enough to keep going, replied Maba, who disappeared in a flock of ravens. Arachne and Dokurin were heading back to the castle. Dokurin, though, was thinking about her cousin's achievement. Naruto managed to create a powerful weapon. He really is the best, thought Dokurin as she blushed thinking about him. Arachne noticed her daughter beginning to fidget and knew that it was her crush on Naruto that was causing it. She was surprised that Dokurin still had a crush on little Naruto, and she took the moment to think back and found that he would certainly be a ladies' man when he grew up. Crona suddenly had a shiver go up her spine for some reason and held onto her Oni-chan's arm tighter, as she felt like something or someone was going to take him from her. Iruka and Mizune walked ahead of their moms while they talked. Well, Iruka was talking, Mizune was listening. Can you believe that? Naruto's so lucky, muttered Iruka, who felt dissatisfied with her weapon, while Mizune merely nodded. Maybe he'd be willing to help you too if you asked nicely, chimed in Megumi, who smiled at seeing Iruka's head go up with excitement, while her friend Sakuya shook her head, but with a grin on her face at her friend's suggestion. Meanwhile, a young girl wearing a larger version of her clothing walked down the sidewalk with a tall man next to her. He had long, straight gray hair while his eyes were brown. He wore a large brown overcoat draped over his shoulders like a cape with visible cuts on the end. He had a high-collar Japanese-style, button-down white shirt and olive-green dress pants. He also had a pair of twine sandals, while also having a piece of twine in his mouth. He had a bag of swords on his back while holding a single sword over his shoulder. This was Mifune, a strong human who had saved Angela not that long ago from a mafia family due to his softness for kids. But he wasn't the only adult with the young witch. The other adult happened to be a black cat with large yellow eyes, ears with pale bushy tips and a long curly tail, but she wore a witch's hat and a collar with a round bauble that had 3 triangles etched into it to resemble a jack-o'-lantern's face. This was Blair, a cat with a lot of magical energy that was the same one that met with Naruto and the others. She was currently in her cat form, as her human form would be bad, as she didn't want to accidentally corrupt young Angela. She had run into them after Mifune rescued the young witch and decided to tag along. It had been a few years, so maybe she could pay Naruto and his family a visit. Mifune stopped, which made the other two stop as well. They saw a female leaning against the wall of a building, wearing a schoolgirl's outfit. She gave them a brief glance before facing them completely. "Hello, my name is Shala, and I have a proposal for you three," replied Shala, who hid a dark grin with her false, innocent look. This could cause trouble of our young protagonists. 4 months later, we currently find Naruto and Crona sitting in a circle with Dokurin, Iruka, and Mizune as their mothers, along with Maba, were standing in front of them. "So why are we here, Ka-chan?" Naruto asked as Medusa looked at him seriously before sighing and began telling them of their new assignment. "Childrens," she began, "after talking with each other, we've decided to give you your first mission to test your abilities and see how far you have gotten." That surprised the young witches and sorcerer before they cheered, much to the mother's amusement. "So we've decided to have all of you work together on this assignment," replied Arachne. Dokurin raised her hand for a question. "Yes, Dokurin? What do we have to do?" asked Dokurin. "Your mission is to locate and meet with a fellow witch at these coordinates," replied Maba, displaying a set of magical coordinates. The children then memorized the coordinates, and soon went running towards the forest, and where the witch they had to locate was in. Back with Medusa and the others, they merely watched where their children had gone before Arachne turned to her sister and asked, "Are you sure we were supposed to let them go towards her?" The snake witch sighed before answering, "While I'm worried about them, we must give her one chance to make amends, because if we were able to do so, then maybe she can as well." We now find ourselves back with Naruto and the rest of the girls as they made their way through the forest. "So, what do you think this witch looks like?" asked Iruka. Mizune shrugged her shoulders while Naruto tapped his chin. "Not sure, but she must be important for our first mission," replied Naruto. Crona and Dokurin both nodded. The group began to slow down and stopped when they saw a small pit ahead of them that was crawling with scorpions. Not going that way. Naruto looked around and began to climb a tree and help the girls up before he led the way across the branch that hung above the pit. Do you think she's here? Crona wondered before she saw Naruto going in. Oniai-chan? Don't worry, Crona-chan. Everything will be fine. He assured her with a smile, missing the blush on his sister's face and the slight envy in the other girl's eyes. After all, Ka-chan and the others allowed us to do this mission because we can complete it. Indeed, Naruto-kun, a female voice said, surprising the children as they saw a certain scorpion which grinned from the door. So are you gonna come in or what? Naruto watched as the girls headed inside while he took caution when going inside. Something was telling him that this witch was dangerous. After entering, they took a seat at a kitchen table and kept their eyes on Shala, who was carrying a tray of tea. I thought you needed something to drink after the long way over here. Smiled Shala with an innocent expression. Well, thanks, said Naruto awkwardly as he and the girls drank the tea given to them before their eyes widened, and they began to drink more. It's delicious, thank you. After all, I want my guests to be as comfortable as they can. Shala grinned, because even if she was evil, she wanted to give any guest a good time, perhaps a side effect from working at a cafe, but she wasn't complaining about it. So what's your name, miss? Asked a curious Iruka as Shala smirked. My name is Shala Gorgon, the youngest of the Gorgon sisters. Iruka and Mizun stopped and tried to swallow the rest of their tea from the sudden info and saw Dokurin, Crona, and Naruto stop in place with their eyes widened. So you're, began Dokurin. Our aunt, continued Crona. Shala? Finished Naruto. Yes, replied Shala. The three children were silent before Auntie. They threw themselves at the surprised Shala and hugged her before asking many questions. Where had you been? What animals can you use? Do you have any gifts? Shala laughed at the barrage of questions and got up with them, letting her. Easy now, and in order. I've been living out here cause I wanted some peace and quiet. My animal is the scorpion, which you've probably guessed from the pit. I put that to keep intruders out. And sadly no, finished Shala. Naruto, Crona, and Dokurin frowned at the last part, but smiled at realizing something. And Shala, we need to get to know each other, replied Naruto. Crona and Dokurin nodded enthusiastically at that. Sounds fine to me, replied Shala. Afterwards Shala told them about some moments from her childhood with Medusa and Arachne on some misadventures as they learned how to use their powers while avoiding witch hunters to when they separated and each one followed their own paths. Wow, what a great story, Auntie/Lady Shala, said all the children after hearing the story. Thank you. Shala smiled at the group before noticing the time. I think your mother's maybe worried right now. Oh man! She's right, yelled Naruto, who got up and ran to the door with the others following. Shala waited till they were gone before heading over to the bookshelf and pulled one book out that caused the whole shelf to slide open. She entered a dark passageway that stretched on for quite a length. She walked down the hall and kept track of where she was by how far the entrance was. Finally, she came upon a door and opened it to reveal Mifune talking to Angel and Blair currently napping. All their attention turned to her when she opened the door. Hello there. Did you miss me? Shala mock asked as Mifune sighed and Blair woke up. Yon W hats up? The cat witch mumbled before seeing Shala and returning to her human form. Finally! What took you so long? Sorry about that. I was just spending time with my nephew and nieces, Shala said in a happier tone before getting serious. Now, have any of you have heard of a Kishin sealed in Death City? I've heard some rumors about it a few years back, but no details, replied Blair. Well, we'll find out in a few years, replied Shala. What do you mean? asked Mifune. We are going to attack the academy and free the Kishin, replied Shala with a grin. What? Both adults said in shock while Angela looked curiously and wondered what was going on. You heard me right. Shala grinned darkly. We now find ourselves in front of Shibuya Academy, where young meisters and weapons train hard to be the best of the best. Naruto couldn't help but grin upon seeing the place he and his friends were going to study at soon. Right now, he had grown up with the rest of his friends. He currently wore a white buttoned-up shirt with a black tie and blue jeans on. This is gonna be so awesome. No, girls? He asked with a smile. Each of them nodded as each of them had changed. Crona now wore a black and white kimono that accented her body and with sandals. Bleach's Shinigami uniform. Iruka was wearing the Academy's version of the female uniform, except the sleeves were extra long that they covered most of her hands. That, and she didn't have her hat. Mizun now wore a black and white uniform that showed off her body. Like CC from Code Geass, Dokurin wore a black shirt with blue jeans on with a small spider necklace around her neck. Indeed, Nisan? Crona answered as she blushed. Should we stick together or spread out? Asked Aruka, who remembered that they had been sent here to understand what these kids learned so they could be prepared in the future. Along with the fact Medusa said she had a feeling something was going to happen. I think we should stay together at first, then maybe explore later by ourselves once we know enough of this academy, suggested Dokurin as everyone nodded. Naruto grinned as he and the girls walked up the stairs as his mother already got them signed into the school, so they merely needed to be on time for their first class. Eventually they made it to the room where their first class was after ignoring a blue-haired boy scream about becoming a god or whatever. "Ah, you all must be the new students," greeted the teacher, who appeared to be a man with a screw through his head wearing glasses and a lab coat. "Yeah, we are." "Are you our teacher?" Naruto asked. "Yes. You may address me as Professor Stein," replied Stein, who took the chance and turned the screw in his head as it was a common habit of his. The group wisely decided to not comment about that and introduced themselves. "Naruto," waved Naruto. "Crona," muttered Crona. "Iruka," smiled Iruka. Mizun nodded her head while Iruka said she's Mizun. "Dokurin," whispered Dokurin before looking away. Stein nodded before showing them where they had to seat. Naruto sat next to a boy with white hair while the girls sat on his left. "Hey there, I'm SoulEater, and you are?" introduced Soul to the cool guy next to him. "Naruto's the name, and fighting's my game," replied Naruto. "Neat," Soul said as they too soon began to talk about what they liked as the girls smiled watching Naruto make a friend before talking to some girls around them, making friends as well. "Alright, class. Today, we'll be dissecting this bird," smiled Stein as he pulled the sheet off a cage to reveal a bird inside it. Everyone got a sick look on their faces as their faces became green. That was the moment the bell chose to ring. Thank death, they all thought. They rushed out of the class before Stein could say anything. "Oh well, more for me," grinned Stein, looking at the bird with a dark look while holding a scalpel. "Let's give a moment of silence for that poor bird." We find ourselves back with Naruto and the girls as they took this time to talk with Soul and his Meister Maka. "So how close are you both from making Soul a death scythe?" Naruto asked. Both of them looked away as Maka rubbed the back of her head. "It's kinda embarrassing," remarked Soul. "What happened?" Crona asked. "I accidentally ate a cat's soul, and lost all 99 souls we got," replied Soul. "Ouch," Mizun said, feeling sympathy for them. "So now we're back to square one," sighed Maka. "That's bad," Naruto said. "The only thing worse is having to deal with one guy," sighed Maka, rubbing her head. "And who is that?" Iruka asked. That was the cue as the blue-haired guy from before came walking over to them with a wide grin. "Ugh, that guy," everyone said before looking at each other wide-eyed. "You know him?" asked Naruto with surprise. "Sadly, yes," Maka said. "And you?" "We heard him when we got here," sighed Naruto as the guy sat back in his seat and set his feet up on the desk. That's when he took notice of the new students. Well, what do we have here?" he said. All of them sighed on the inside as the guy pointed to him with his thumb. "No matter, because after all no one can defeat a god," he screamed, but found that everyone was ignoring him. "Blackstar, maybe you should be more polite," suggested a black-haired girl who stood next to him with her hair fashioned into a long ponytail. "TSK, yeah, Tsubaki. Whatever you say," Blackstar said without a care. The girl known as Tsubaki sighed before introducing herself. "Sorry about that. I'm Tsubaki, and it's a pleasure to meet you all," she said with a smile. "Naruto, same to ya," greeted Naruto, who deduced these two must have been Meister and Weapon. The girls nodded before introducing themselves as well. "I'm Crona, Naruto's sister. I'm Dokurin, his cousin. I'm Iruka and she's Mizun. We're his closest friends," smiled Iruka. Tsubaki just smiled, liking their company. "TCH, boring," muttered Blackstar, closing his eyes to take a nap. "I hope he doesn't end up acting more of a jerk," Naruto said. "You're preaching to the choir." Soul nodded. Blackstar kept one eye opened and noticed Dokurin. He got a perverted grin as he stood on the desk and pointed at her. "Hey you!" he screamed. "Yes?" Dokurin asked, annoyed. "I'm Blackstar, a living god in this school. And I pick you to be my girlfriend." "Hell no!" snapped Naruto darkly. Blackstar turned to Naruto with an expression that said, "What was that? Hell." "No!" growled Naruto as Dokurin blushed. "Oh? And who says?" "She should feel honored I even looked at her," grinned Blackstar with a smug look on his face. "I say that, and it's the other way around actually, with you being thankful of even seeing someone like her," said Naruto, unaware of Dokurin's growing blush. "Naruto," she thought as Blackstar stood up and got in his face. "Wanna make something of it? And if I do?" Naruto said as he had a dark look on his face. "I'll just kick your ass," sneered Blackstar. "No chance in hell," Naruto said back. These two had gathered a crowd from Blackstar's outburst, and now watched the two to see what would happen. "Last chance to apologize and back off," grunted Naruto. "Apologize for what? Putting you in your place?" grinned Blackstar. Naruto sighed before delivering an uppercut that would have made any MK character proud and sent Blackstar flying around. Everyone watching were stunned and flinched when Blackstar's head went right through the ceiling. "Fatality!" shouted Patty, making everyone look at her in surprise as she arrived alongside Liz and Kid. "Patty, how many times have I told you to stop quoting games?" sighed Liz. "But sis, tell me that didn't look like right out of Mortal Kombat," whined Patty. Liz sighed at her sister's overjoyous nature while Kid took the moment to look at who Blackstar was annoying this time. Said annoyance was barely conscious from the attack he got. Tsubaki sighed at the trouble her partner got into again, and went to try and yank him down. "Once again, I apologize for that, Naruto-san," Tsubaki said. "Don't worry about it. He'll live, but not with that attitude of his," remarked Naruto. "Fair enough," she said before carrying Blackstar to the nurse's office. Naruto noticed the kid with the black and white suit unseemingly stare at something as though it was scaring him. "Excuse me, but what are you staring at?" Naruto asked. "Your left sleeve is longer than your right," he managed to say. "So?" Naruto asked. "Both sleeves should be the exact same length," replied Kid, who was sweating. "Why does that concern you?" Naruto asked, feeling a bit creeped out. "He gets sick if anything is not lined up perfectly," chimed in Liz. "OCD?" Iruka muttered, surprised. "Yup," chimed in Patty. "I pity you," Mizun said. Kid sighed as he and his partners sat down just as a red-haired man walked in with a black suit. "Hello there, I'm Spirit, one of your teachers for this year at DWMA," the red-haired man said. "Today, we have some new students here today." Naruto and the girls took that as their cue to introduce themselves. "I'm Naruto, it's a pleasure," the blonde said happily, making several girls blush. "I'm Crona, nice to meet you," nodded Crona, who made a few boys blush at her shy nature. "I'm Iruka Frog, and she's Mizun," Iruka said, introducing herself and Mizun, who nodded. "And I'm Dokurin," said Dokurin, who kept a cold look on her face. "Well then, please go to your assigned seats," Spirit said. All of them calmly took their seats and let him start the class. "Now then, let us see if you're all either Meister, weapon, or perhaps a mix," Spirit said, making everyone wonder about the last part. He started saying names, and said kid with that name would stand up, name what they are, and maybe show a demonstration. Although there was a comical moment when he got to Maka's name, which ended with Spirit getting a Maka chop to the head before he recovered and continued. "Naruto," he groaned while rubbing his head. "A mix," Naruto said before he summoned his black blood weapon, getting surprised looks from everyone. Spirit put that down and called Crona. "Mix," she answered before summoning Ragnarok in his sword form, surprising most of the presents. Spirit was impressed to see a second mix and this time called on Mizun. "Mix," she said before summoning her weapon, shocking everyone yet again. Spirit put that down and soon called on the rest of the girls, getting the same reaction from each. "So we got several mixes besides my little Maka. How interesting," Spirit told to himself. This was rather interesting and very rare to happen in one day, but he decided to let it go for later and begin the class lesson. "Okay. Today, we're going to go over what a Meister and weapon do. Can anyone explain?" asked Spirit. Surprisingly enough, Maka, Naruto, and Kid raised their hands at the same time. "Alright, Naruto. What is the answer?" Meisters are those that are capable of using demonic weapons and even learn to fight physically against Kishin, while weapons are those that can transform themselves into weapons to fight Kishin, but they normally require help of their Meisters to do so, at least until they become a death scythe, in which case they can fight for themselves, explained the blonde as everyone looked at him in surprise. "Very good," remarked Spirit, who was impressed. "Nice job, Nisan/Naruto-kun/cousin," all the girls said. Naruto nodded to each of them as the class continued with merely going over history. And while some like Mizun, Dokurin, Crona and Maka paid attention, other like Soul, Naruto, and Iruka couldn't help but fall asleep. Crona tried to get her brother to wake up, but he was stubborn when it came to getting sleep. But, at least he looks cute like that, she thought before blushing. Dokurin kept her cold mask on, but inside she was still the shy girl she was years ago. Naruto-chan is so CQT, she inwardly squealed. Iruka had made sure Naruto went to sleep first before joining him by leaning her head against his. That lucky/damned frog. Both Crona and Dokurin cursed while Mizun stared blankly. She held a neutral haze, but she was clenching her hands under the desk and away from eyes. Soon the bell ringed, announcing the class end and making Naruto and the others wake up. Naruto stretched out and noticed Iruka's head on his shoulder. Cute, he thought before blushing. Iruka, wake up, spoke Naruto, shaking her. What? She said as she woke up. Time to wake up, said Naruto. With a final sigh, she woke up. The group made their way to the school's nurse to say hello to Medusa, but surprisingly both Maka and Soul tagged along because they were curious to see how they knew the nurse. When they got there, Naruto needed the others to hold him back as Blackstar was not only being nursed by his mother, but he was making no attempt to hide his gaze at her chest. But luckily to him, Maka took care of that with a Maka chop, knocking him out again. Naruto slowly calmed himself down at seeing the brat get knocked out and walked over to Medusa. Thanks once again, Maka, Naruto said as the mention scratched her head embarrassed. Good to see you, Naruto, smiled Medusa, pulling Naruto into a hug. Good to see you too, Ka-chan, he said. Crona walked over and joined in the hug with her mother and brother. Kei-chan? Both Maka and Soul yelled in shock. Yeah, this is our mom, smiled Naruto, gesturing to Medusa. Whoa, but she looks so young, Soul said before an embarrassed and jealous Maka used her Maka chop on him. Yup, she's always been a natural beauty, remarked Naruto, scratching his cheek. I see. Well, it's good to meet you, Ms. Medusa, Maka said. Medusa smiled in return. Just call me nurse here. Maka nodded before she and Soul got out. Once they detected they were a safe distance away, Medusa turned to her kids. So how was your first day here? She asked, amused. Boring, replied Naruto, with Crona nodding as well. The only interesting thing that happened was Naruto-kun uppercutting that star brat, Dokurin said. Medusa frowned as she was glad that Maka girl knocked him out. He was a fool if he thought she wouldn't notice. So what about you, Medusa-san? Asked Mizun. Boring. Not many people get sent here on the first day, moaned Medusa. Don't worry, Ka-chan, Naruto said. Medusa smiled at her son's upbeat attitude and rubbed his head. How cute you are, Naruto-chan, she grinned. Naruto blushed and moved back. Ka-chan. Not at school. Ni-chan is so cute, Crona said. Naruto blushed from his sister and sighed. What should I do? He mock asked. Well, you could show us your animal form, suggested Iruka. Naruto actually gasped. No, not after last time. All the girls grinned and nodded their heads together. Please, not that, he begged. Maybe I could show off some of your baby pictures to the girls in the locker room, suggested Medusa. No, Naruto screamed. Medusa smiled as Naruto sighed and began to glow an orange color as his form started to shrink. Naruto's animal form was a humanoid fox around 3 foot with orange-yellow fur, blue wide eyes, white gloves, red shoes, and 9 tails. Like Tails from Sonic, but with 9 tails instead of 2. The instant he was done transforming, Iruka grabbed him and held him to her chest. Kawaii, she yelled as he blushed, which made him look cuter. Iruka, can't breath, groaned Naruto's fox face. He's right, Mizun said before pushing away Iruka, separating her from Naruto, who sighed, before Mizun hugged him as well. Mizun smiled as Naruto was hoping he didn't go out like this. Leave Ni-chan alone, Crona said as Ragnarok surprisingly helped her by appearing and taking Naruto away from the now pouting Mizun. Crona held Naruto close and rubbed his head and managed to find a spot behind his ear and began to scratch it. AAA. No, purred Naruto, making all the girls blush harder. Crona, you need to hold him properly, spoke Dokurin, who grabbed Naruto and began to rock him in her arms like a baby. Dokukwan. Naruto moaned in a cute voice, grateful of his cousin saving him, but not aware of what he had done. Dokurin blushed at hearing that and glomped him against her chest. Too cute, help! The poor fox boy pleaded. Enough, all of you, ordered Medusa with a stern gaze. All the girls flinched as Dokurin released Naruto, who cried happily. Before Medusa glomped him as well. He needs his mother, smiled Medusa, who held Naruto right next to her breasts. Mama? Naruto said as he blushed more, and a certain part of his now animal anatomy was awakening. That was the moment his form shifted back to normal, as he still had yet to master it. Thank Maba! Naruto cried in happiness as the mentioned witch sneezed and blushed for some reason. The girls pouted at the end of their fun, but understood it can get tiring for Naruto. Fine, but next time we'll take photos, said Medusa as all girls giggled. Naruto shook his head at their need to embarrass him like that. What did I do to deserve this? He asked himself, yet he smiled happily. Meanwhile, in a small cafe a little bit away from the school, is where we find a waitress as she served tables. This particular waitress though looked at the school and held a sinister grin on her face. Soon, you will all pay, she thought. Naruto and the girls were currently looking over the board that showed several jobs for meisters and weapons to accept. Which one you think we should take? Naruto asked curiously. What about this one? Suggested Iruka, grabbing the form for them all to see. They all saw that the mission was about an investigation in the sea in search of a ghost ship. Ghosts? Squeaked Dokurin. Unknown to many except Naruto and the others, Dokurin had a fear of ghosts because she was afraid of fighting an opponent that could hit her, yet she couldn't hit back. Don't worry, we'll finish it in no time, reassured Naruto. Dokurin nodded, but the way her body trembled showed that she was still uneasy, and thus Naruto did the first thing that came to his mind, which was to hug her. Dokurin slowly calmed down as Mizune sighed. If she was like this from reading it, being on the ship would be tough, which meant that for her to be calm, Naruto would have to be near her all the time. I think I'd better keep her calm, piped up Mizune, who'd rather keep the girl calm than see her cling on to Naruto. The other girls nodded upon hearing that. Dokurin was disappointed as Naruto and her separated, while said males said he'd go tell Lord Death they would accept this mission. The girls nodded as he soon went away. Don't worry, Dokurin. Ghosts won't come near us when we find that ship, reassured Iruka. Are you sure? She asked with some fear. Yes. Besides, there are worse things, shrugged Iruka. Like what? Dokurin asked. Spiders, chimed in Mizune as Iruka jumped at the sound of the name. Dokurin frowned. What's bad about my mother's spiders? Not those. Iruka here used to sleep near a small pond and one time found a spider on her nose, replied Mizune as Iruka was looking around if said arachnid was around. So what? I think that's normal, Dokurin said, because after all she and her mother slept alongside thousands of spider familiars. The eyes, all those eyes, mumbled Iruka, hiding behind Mizune. Dokurin narrowed her eyes before she got a devilish idea and smiled like Naruto when he was about to do a prank. She called a single spider familiar to land on her hand and patted Iruka on the shoulder. Iruka turned around, but froze up upon seeing the spider's many eyes looking at her with innocence. Aha! Screamed Iruka, jumping and running straight down the hall. Everyone else looked weirded out except Dokurin, who giggled darkly. That was dark, mumbled Crona. She deserves it for insulting my family's familiars, Dokurin said with a pout. Soon Naruto came back with a smile. We got the mission. Then he noticed a certain witch missing. Hey, where's Iruka? She'll catch up, replied Mizune. So, should we get going? Better wait for her to make sure, Naruto said, worried for his friend. That's when a small note appeared in front of them. What does it say? Asked Crona as Naruto caught it and read it. Guys, please head down to the train to reach a dock with a boat we can use. I'll catch up, signed Iruka. They heard what was on the note and nodded, going to begin the mission. Time exit. After taking a train to the designated port, they rented a speedboat for a fast way to reach where the ghost ship was. So what should we expect? Crona asked, curious. Some kind of weird ship, spoke Naruto. What does it look like? Asked Iruka, who sat the furthest away from Dokurin in case of another spider prank. I'm guessing that, remarked Mizune, pointing ahead as they saw a fog with a large ship slowly coming into view. Eek! Dokurin cried out as she hid behind Naruto in fear. Don't worry, it's just a worn-out ship, reassured Naruto as they slowed the speed down near a ladder that led up to the deck of the ship. Soon they all were inside and felt several souls near them. You feel that? This is definitely the ship, whispered Naruto. Yes, I can feel several souls around us, Mizune said. Did the mission say what we're supposed to do next? Asked Iruka. Yes. We must free all the souls trapped here and defeat the Kishin, answered Mizun. KH. Sounded a laughter. Instantly everyone got together on guard, readying their weapons to fight the Kishin. Ha! You really think you can stop me? Dream on! Laughed the voice. Just show yourself, growled Naruto. Let's see you try and find me. KH. And with that, everything fell silent. We'll need to split up to find him, spoke Naruto. Who's going with who? Asked Iruka. I'll head out on my own. You girls decide who will go with who. Naruto said. I'll go with Mizun. Crona said as the mention nodded. Iruka stiffened as that meant she and Dokurin had to go together. Oh no. I don't think Dokurin would like to be near me after what I said about spiders, she thought with regret. Soon Naruto, Mizun, and Crona headed off, leaving Iruka and Dokurin by themselves. While Iruka was panicking, Dokurin was going through something similar. She was shivering because of that laughter, which fueled her fear even more. I'm scared, she thought as she unknowingly got closer to Iruka. Let's get going, stuttered Iruka as they started walking down the hall. This is gonna be hard, both girls thought as one. Both of them kept an eye out for any sign of the Kishin while holding their weapons, but it didn't help ease their nerves at all. KH. This'll be easy, muttered the Kishin to himself as he followed the two girls down the hall. Crona and Mizun, the two girls kept an eye out for any sign of the Kishin. Any idea where he is? Mizun asked Crona, who shaked her head no. Not sure, mumbled Crona. So why did you want me as your partner when you know that I work better with Iruka? Mizun asked curiously. I feel like Iruka and Dokurin need some time to get over their fears, replied Crona. Mizun nodded upon hearing that. They stopped as they heard something behind them. They then saw the ghost of a cute girl with an emotionless look on her face. Both of them held their weapons at the ready, even though she didn't seem dangerous. Who are you? Asked Crona. Me? To be honest, it has been too long that I don't even remember my own name, answered the girl without emotion. Well, can you tell us where the Kishin is? Asked Mizun. Kishin? You mean the bad guy? Asked the girl. Yes, do you know where he's at? Asked Crona. The girl nodded in answer. Can you show us where he's at? Requested Mizun. The girl once again nodded. She turned and walked down the hall with the two girls following. Naruto kept his eyes all around him as he used his heightened senses to see if anything popped out. The blonde wondered how his friends were doing around the ship. He heard some creaking sounds nearby and started to follow them. Then he felt Iruka's and Dokurin's presences alongside another one filled with negative emotions. That must be the Kishin, he thought, running to the location. Iruka and Dokurin. Listen, I didn't mean anything by it when, spoke Iruka. It's alright. I also apologize for that prank, Dokurin said. Both of them smiled. Before the sound of a gun was heard and Iruka received a scratch on her cheek that started bleeding. What dash? She gasped before she and Dokurin jumped to avoid several bullets. KH. Came the laugh again. Iruka focused her magic at the end of her nunchucks and swung at it at the ceiling, releasing the small tadpole bomb. The Kishin was forced of his hiding spot as the bomb exploded and revealed him. He appeared like the ship's captain with a pair of small glasses over his eyes and a smile on his face that revealed his teeth. So this is the Kishin, Dokurin muttered. I'm surprised at how ugly it is, smirked Iruka, whose comments seemed to make the Kishin angry. Or how cliché he looks like. Dokurin followed in the game. Both of them giggled with the Kishin gritting his teeth in anger. How dare you? Growled the Kishin, preparing to attack. Dokurin held her arms back before launching her chakram at the Kishin, with Iruka flinging more of her bombs as well. Is that all? Sneered the Kishin, avoiding the attacks. The Kishin got his answer in the form of a larger tadpole bomb the size of himself throw at him. Sure dash? He couldn't finish as the bomb hit him and exploded. The explosion shook the ship as Mizun and Crona had found the room full of lots of souls. What was that? Asked Crona, nervous. Not sure, but we completed part of the mission by finding the souls, spoke Mizun. Souls? Came Ragnarok's voice from inside Crona as the demon's sword materialized himself out and drooled at the room filled with souls. Don't even think of it, Ragnarok, Crona warned. He slumped in defeat before a figure burst through the wall of the room, revealing it to be the Kishin. What about him then? Asked Ragnarok, ignoring the Meister's shock. You won't take these souls back, These souls are gonna be worth a lot, like hell, growled Naruto's voice as said blonde appeared in front of the Kishin with a raised fist and punched the Kishin away. The Kishin surprised them by disappearing into the wall itself without any damage shown. Shit! Where did he go? Iruka cursed. No idea, but he's still here, spoke Naruto. How do you know that? Mizan asked. I can hear him moving around the ship, he replied. That, and I can sense him with my negative emotion sensing, Naruto thought. The Kishin brought his head out from the ceiling and started firing bullets towards Naruto's head. Naruto turned around and barely managed to block the bullets with his weapon. The Kishin would have fired more, but found his hand cut off from Crona jumping off and using her sword. Gah! You bitch! The Kishin cursed as he held the stump where his hand was. No one calls my sister that, growled Naruto holding his sword to the side as he ran at the Kishin. The Kishin tried to run, but found himself held by several spider webs that came from Dokurin. Die! Yelled Naruto bisecting him down the middle. The Kishin gasped as both his halves suddenly became a red soul. Naruto held his sword in between the two halves as they were absorbed into the blade. Well, that's it, Naruto said with a yawn. Did you guys patch things up? Asked Crona. Iruka and Dokurin nodded with smiles on their faces. So, what do we do about them? Asked Dokurin. Return them to Lord Death, Naruto said. All of them nodded before Dokurin draped a net over the souls to keep them together. But then they heard the young girl's soul say thank you. Before she was put in the net with the others, they loaded the net onto the boat before driving away, completing the mission. Italy, Maka panted as sweat dripped from her forehead. She and Soul had come here for a mission, and had found themselves fighting a strange cloaked figure. The figure was obviously a witch, yet so far she hasn't used any spell while she and Soul kept wasting energy. The figure looked at her and Maka spotted something long coming towards her. That something was revealed to be a scorpion tail that was about to strike her. She tried to slice it, but it was faster and was aimed for her chest. But then she saw her partner Soul return to his human form and take the hit for her. Gah! Gasped Soul as the stinger had pierced his stomach before pulling back. Soul! Maka screamed as she held her partner in panic and fear. Funk! It burns like hell, groaned Soul feeling like his body was on fire. Soul, hang in there, Maka said as she saw the figure vanish. She slung Soul over her shoulder and grabbed her phone to call her dad. Yes, Maka? Maka looked at her partner in worry as she prayed her father got there in time. Asked Spirit as he saw the call from his daughter. Dad, Soul is hurt. We need help, yelled Maka into the phone. What? How did it happen? Spirit screamed seriously. No time. Just get over here, yelled Maka. All right, Spirit said. Maka looked at her partner in worry as she prayed her father got there in time. Here you go, Lord Death, grunted Naruto as he placed a net full of souls in front of the Shinigami. My, there certainly are a lot of souls in here. Thank you for returning them safe and sound, nodded Lord Death. It was actually easy, grinned Naruto with the girls nodding their heads. I am very impressed with how quick you handled it. To be honest, another student wanted that mission, but he left it hanging as the doors to his room opened. Said student made Naruto and his girls groan as they recognized the familiar blue hair. What's up, Lord D? Called Black Star as he waltzed into the room with a beefy grin and a walk like he was a celebrity. Seriously, Death? What did I ever do to you to deserve this? Naruto thought with a deadpan. Oh, hello, beautiful, grinned Black Star seeing Dokurin. Who are you again? She mock asked with enough coldness in her voice to make a certain bunny vampire proud. I usually don't care about secondary characters after all. Black Star gritted his teeth at the disrespectful girl. The others meanwhile were either surprised at what Dokurin said or were laughing in amusement. You should be thankful I even give a glance, growled Black Star. You should be grateful that you exist right now instead of trying to provoke your own death, said Naruto stepping in. Step aside, worm, glared Black Star in Naruto's face. Naruto growled as he said, make me, bug, outside. Now, growled Black Star before he turned to leave the room. Naruto growled as he felt a hand held his arm, making him turn to face the one that dared to stop him. The one who stopped him was Crona. What is it, Nei-chan? He asked. Don't stoop to his level. Let me handle him, spoke Crona with a serious face. That statement surprised everyone as Ragnarok appeared and declared in shock. Who are you and what have you done with the Crona I knew? Ragnarok, get ready to kick this bug's ass, replied Crona staring Black Star in the eye. Ragnarok nodded in a mix of awe and fear as he went inside his Meister again. Heh, I won't even break a sweat, smugly replied Black Star. You took the words out of my mouth, muttered Crona as she summoned Ragnarok in sword form. Hold up. If you two will fight, take it outside, spoke Lord Death. Everyone nodded as they went outside, leaving Lord Death to look at the collected souls. I have a feeling this won't end well. I hope Crona doesn't hurt him too bad, Lord Death said. Outside, Black Star stood across from Crona as word spread quickly about their little match. As a result, several Meisters and weapons were around them in a circle, including Maka and Soul, with the former shaking her head. Last chance to back out. I don't want to humiliate a fellow guy, shrugged Black Star. Then everyone went silent as they heard what Black Star had said, including a now paling group of witches and a wizard. I'm pretty sure that's a chick, spoke a random Meister from the crowd. Yeah, she told us so, Soul said as he held Maka back from using a Maka chop on Black Star. She can do that after the fight is over. Eh? That's a chick? Exclaimed Black Star in surprise while pointing at said girl whose eyes were shadowed by her hair. Die! Roared Crona as the chainsaw whirled to life as she looked like she wasn't even touching the ground as she raced straight at the surprised Meister. Oh crap! Black Star yelled as he quickly jumped away from Crona's range in fear of something he just unleashed. A pissed-off woman. Tsubaki! Weapon mode! Called Black Star to his partner. Wait, wasn't he supposed to fight alone? Asked Iruka confused. Considering Crona can form her weapon from her body, it makes sense he should be allowed to use his partner, spoke Naruto. Fine, grumbled the frog witch. Tsubaki! Cried Black Star as his partner still didn't transform yet. Tsubaki quickly shook off her fear upon seeing Crona's face before transforming into a shuriken that Black Star caught. He grinned before launching himself at her as her chainsaw and Tsubaki met with sparks between the two of them. But then Tsubaki was pushed back because of Crona's ruthlessness, as she quickly slashed Black Star's shoulder with Ragnarok, causing some blood to fly off. Black Star hissed, but jumped back as the chainsaw nearly cut him in two down the middle. Crap! Are you trying to kill me? He yelled in panic. Maybe, grinned Crona before the chainsaw reverted back to Ragnarok's regular sword form. Please let him be killed, mentally begged Naruto. Black Star grinned as Tsubaki changed into her knife form. Take this, Black Star shouted as he went to strike Crona's back, yet Ragnarok shifted into a scythe and blocked her back from the knife's attack. Amateur move. Crona smiled before Ragnarok went back to his sword mode and Crona pivoted around to try and slash the Meister. Black Star cursed as he received a slash to his chest and jumped away. He grinned though as Tsubaki changed into her smoke bomb move and threw it at the ground, obscuring both figures. Damn it! Cursed Naruto, worried for his sister. Crona kept her eyes peeled as she tried to see if she could spot the boy in the smoke. Crona, be careful, whispered Ragnarok. She understood and quickly blocked a strike as Black Star nearly got her in the side with Tsubaki in knife mode. Good try, grunted Crona before using her left arm to hold Black Star's throat like nothing. But not enough, Black Star gasped as he was stunned at the strength this bitch had. What, are you? He managed to say. Your executioner, grinned Crona with a mad look in her eyes as she aimed Ragnarok's tip under his chin. Do it! Do it! Do it! Do it! Repeated Ragnarok. Nei-chan! Don't! Yelled Naruto. He may have prayed for the arrogant brat's death, but he'd rather his sister not be responsible and have to deal with the guilt. Crona's eyes widened before she unceremoniously dropped Black Star on the ground, making him drop Tsubaki and gasp for air. Why didn't you end him? Asked Ragnarok. Because Nisan doesn't want it, Crona said as a whisper of yet went through her mind quickly before it dissipated. Black Star gasped for air as Tsubaki tried to help him up, but he was too busy glaring at Crona's back. 3. That bitch almost killed me. A god! He mentally ranted. Tsubaki, sword mode, whispered Black Star. What? Tsubaki gasped as she felt being forced to transform into a sword. I didn't stutter, growled Black Star. But the battle's over, Tsubaki said in panic. It's over when I say it's over, he growled. Now do it! Tsubaki tried to say something to stop Black Star, but she was stuck in weapon form and saw him go after Crona. Crona sensed the boy coming at her, but he was too close for her to turn around and block him. Shit! She thought in panic. Just as Black Star was about to pierce her throat, Tsubaki's tip was blocked from a familiar large sword. Nervously, Black Star saw the holder of the weapon and almost crapped his pants at what he saw, Naruto glaring at him with a slight red glow in his eyes. But what instead Black Star saw was a nine-tailed demonic fox hundreds of feet tall, judging him as unworthy to even be an wrong move. Came the fox's deep voice as Black Star didn't even notice the large sword pulled away before he felt searing pain across his chest. What dash? He gasped as he dropped Tsubaki's weapon form as he noticed the blood going off his chest. Naruto kept his glare as the brat before him fell on his back. Pathetic. He muttered in a cold voice as Tsubaki returned to her human form, but was shaking due to Naruto's glare, even if it wasn't rigged to her. And this is how a so-called god reacts to defeat? Then you're nothing but a mere bacteria that needs to be cleaned down. Black Star tried to send one more glare at Naruto before letting his head drop back. Pfft. Coward! Naruto muttered as several students nodded, including Maka and Soul, whom went to see how Tsubaki was. You okay? Asked Soul to the fellow weapon. Aye. Tsubaki muttered before she sighed. To be honest, I'm not. Soul and Maka looked at her in worry as Stein came walking out to see what was going on. What happened here? The normally carefree doctor demanded in a serious tone. Black Star and Crona fought. Spoke Soul. And why do I feel the sudden killer intent with the intention to kill coming from here? Stein revealed. Naruto. Maka interjected. But then Tsubaki spoke. But it wasn't his fault. Because Black Star tried to what? Asked Stein. He tried to kill Naruto's sister after the match was over with her defeating the little prick. Spat Soul in disgust at the UNC foolish thing that Black Star tried to do. Stein narrowed his eyes as Medusa came walking out. What's all this commotion about? Asked Medusa, annoyed upon hearing of two students fighting. Black Star and Crona got into a fight, replied Stein. Medusa narrowed her eyes darkly at the now scared Star Ninja before Naruto dropped the bomb, and he tried to kill her after the match was over with Crona winning. Medusa gritted her teeth as Black Star felt extreme fear from the hot nurse. Do you have any idea what troubles you're in? Snapped Medusa as quickly Stein, Naruto and Crona went to calm her down. He tried to crawl away, but the amount of blood loss was too much and made him pass out. Disgusting. Spat Naruto, feeling like either killing the brat or leaving him to bleed to death. You better patch him up. Spoke Stein with reluctance. Fine, but I assure you that I won't be gentle, at all. Grumbled Medusa as she harshly took a hold on one of Black Star's arms, and proceeded to drag him to the nursery like a trash bag, all while ignoring his annoying words. Naruto slowly began to calm down as he turned to Crona. Are you alright, Nei-chan? Did he do anything bad to you? He asked, worried while checking her body for any kind of wounds. I'm alright. Smiled Crona at her brother's worry. Yeah, Whiskers, she's alright, said Ragnarok. Naruto let out a sigh of relief at that. Thank death, he said before looking at the shaken-up Tsubaki. He walked over and crouched down before placing a hand on her shoulder. She flinched, expecting some insults, yet she didn't expect him to look worried and ask her, Are you alright? Not that much, she admitted. Can't blame ya, especially after what had happened, he said with a sigh. Tsubaki looked down at relieving what just happened to her. But don't worry, it wasn't your fault, comforted Naruto, surprising her. But I nearly killed your sister, exclaimed Tsubaki as fresh tears dripped down her cheeks. That was the blue jerk's fault, not your own, Naruto said as he cleaned her cheeks. Now please don't cry. Tsubaki was stunned that Naruto would smile at her, and felt a little warm at seeing his smile. Now then, why don't we get up? He said while offering her a hand. She meekly nodded her head before grabbing his. Thank you? The weapon whispered in gratitude. No problem. Then Crona, who was not feeling jealous, stepped in with a sweet smile on her face and said, Now, Oniai-chan, we should go see Ka-san before she kills the idiot. Naruto was surprised as Crona grabbed his wrist and dragged him away from Tsubaki. Is something wrong? He asked, nervous. Nope. She smiled at him before they continued to where their mother would be. For some reason, I can't help but be scared hearing that tone, Naruto thought with a shiver on his back. As they reached the office, they spotted Medusa patching Black Star up. Then they noticed the dark scowl on her face, which she hadn't showed since some drunk idiot tried to hit on her one too many times, which ended in a moment that made even Q be afraid, not that the beast would admit it out loud. Black Star grunted as Medusa was not gentle as she applied the bandages. Ag. Can't you be gentle? He said out loud. Oops, my bad. smiled Medusa, who did nothing to hide her sadistic glee at this. Scary. Everyone thought as one. Pretty soon the brat was tied up like a bandage and couldn't move a muscle. Geez, Kaa-chan, you made him look like a mummy, chuckled Naruto. If he has to go to the bathroom, I guess he'll have to hold it, shrugged Medusa. I almost pity that poor bastard, Ragnarok said as everyone looked at him. Almost. Now let's see Crona, spoke Medusa, looking over her daughter. Wait dash, replied a now embarrassed Crona. What? Asked Medusa in confusion. I am alright, answered Crona as Naruto nodded. Well, let me take a look to be sure, replied their mother. Fine. Crona sighed as Medusa did as told, much to her embarrassment. Naruto and the other girls looked away to give them some privacy. But then Naruto saw the bandaged Black Star look at his family, making him frown. He walked over to the brat and snarled as he looked down at him. What are you trying to look at, brat? Growled the blonde. Black Star grunted as the bandages were wrapped around his mouth. Shouldn't someone send him to his room? Iruka asked, disgusted. You want to do it? Muttered Mizun. No, the Frog Witch said. Then I say we leave him here. Good call, Dokurin said. Black Star narrowed his eyes at them as they left him alone. How dare they do that to a god? Mentally roared Black Star in hatred. They're gonna pay. Once I get out of here, they're dead. He grunted out, but it was all muffled due to the bandages. Yet nobody heard him since they all left, leaving him alone. Lord Death's room. And that is all, Lord Death, answered Stein as he finished his report on the fight between Crona and Black Star. Black Star has quite the big head. Indeed, and personally, Lord Death, I think he has gone too far now, frowned Stein. If he's like that to a new student, her brother might not be so kind, spoke Spirit. Indeed, and after what he tried to force his partner to do, I'm afraid we're going to need to separate them, said the Death God seriously. But who could resonate their soul with Tsubaki other than Black Star? Asked Spirit. I think I can take care of that with a project excuse next class, suggested Stein. Do what you can, ordered Lord Death. As you wish, Stein said before he and Spirit left, leaving the god alone. I sense this fight will have a bigger impact than we thought, were his thoughts. If only he knew how right he was on that. Death's room. Lord Death had been mulling over the thought of assigning Tsubaki to Naruto considering Black Star's behavior. He honestly didn't expect Black Star to have acted like he did, and while he knew that the boy wanted to be the best, he hadn't been this chaotic before. I just hope Naruto and Tsubaki can get along better considering Naruto can make his own weapon, thought the god. Then he felt the two mentioned presences coming in his room, making him sigh before adopting his happy persona. Hello you two, greeted Lord Death. Hello Lord Death, both young Meister and Weapon said as one. You both are probably curious why I called you here, correct? Upon seeing them nod, he continued. Due to the recent event involving a certain Meister, I'm afraid that Miss Tsubaki here will need to look for a new partner. Tsubaki gasped while Naruto patted her back. So why am I here then? Wouldn't this be a more private conversation? Asked Naruto. The reason why you're here is to tell you that you're now Miss Tsubaki's new partner. So congratulations, Death said. That caused both students to drop their jaws in shock. What? How can this be? Naruto exclaimed in shock. I believe you and Tsubaki have the chance to be a great combo, especially considering what happened earlier. I see. Naruto then looked at Tsubaki, worried that she might not agree. Said Weapon looked down as she mulled it over. Oh my, what should I do? Will he even accept me as a partner? Especially since I almost killed his sister. She thought, nervous. Maybe she doesn't want this since it came out of nowhere, thought Naruto. Lord Death looked at their expressions before sighing and saying, so what do you think? Well, it's up to her, spoke Naruto. Tsubaki looked at him surprised since she expected him to reject her. Well, it's up to you, Tsubaki, spoke Lord Death. I would like to be his partner, she finally said while thinking, if only to earn his forgiveness. Then it's settled, cheered Lord Death, clapping his hands together. I hope we can get along, Tsubaki-san, Naruto said before extending his arm with a smile. Tsubaki nodded and grabbed his hand as they shook hands. I hope the same, Naruto-san. Glad to hear. You two best try to see if your souls will resonate, suggested Lord Death. Both of them nodded at that before Tsubaki transformed into her weapon form, which was grabbed by Naruto. Now, try and concentrate. They did as told as suddenly they were covered by a golden aura. Whoa, thought Naruto and Tsubaki in awe. This power, It's amazing. Naruto thought. This presence, it's so warm. Thought a now blushing Tsubaki. Lord Death actually put some sunglasses on due to how bright the aura was. This reminds me of her, muttered Lord Death with some melancholy on his voice. Before he could go back to a memory, the aura died down. Well, I guess that's enough proof, no? Death asked, happier than usual. Yeah, nodded Naruto as Tsubaki reformed into her human form. Tsubaki didn't say anything as she still felt like she was in the paradise if her red face had anything to go by. While you two do show great resonance with each other, you still need to keep training to be ready. Alright, /hi. They both said at once before leaving. Those two are in for a treat, thought Lord Death after seeing Tsubaki's red face. Nurse room. Black Star kept an angry look on his face ever since he arrived in this place in a full body cast. Damn them. Damn that bitch. She made a fool of me, he screamed inside. Yeah, he was still sulking after his loss against Crona, ignoring the fact that he had almost killed her after the match was over. The only thing he cared about was the fact he lost to her. I must make her pay. I must defeat her. Make her submit to me. He mentally screamed as his eyes shone red briefly. So vengeance is what you want? Whispered a voice. What the dash? Black Star screamed, freaked out as he looked around. Who's there? Quiet. I'm talking in your mind. What? The boy asked again, this time somewhat lower yet still loud. I'm in your mind, you fool. What? Black Star said, this time low enough to be a whisper. So you want vengeance, right? Yes. Black Star quickly said. I can help with that. How? Demanded the Star Clan member. Simple. I can grant you the power to defeat that girl. How much power are we talking about? Asked the now interested ninja. Enough to be a god. Please, yeah right. I'm already a god. Frowned the ninja. Yet you got your ass whooped with ease. Countered the voice with a smug tone. Shut up. That one didn't count. Snapped Black Star. Then why is it bothering you? Black Star flinched, not being able to answer that one. Either take the offer, or I'll be on my way. Wait. Can I have some time to think about it? Black Star asked because, while the offer was very good, even he could feel that something was off about it, and wanted to at least think about it. No. I have very little patience, so make up your mind. Alright. I'll join you. Black Star said quickly, thinking that he could benefit the most from this. Good. Spoke the voice as Black Star felt like the person behind it was grinning. So now what? Asked the Star Clan member. This might sting. Chuckled the voice as a small fog of blackness floated near his bed before seeping in through the bandages and into his body. Black Star was confused for a moment before he screamed in pain upon feeling the worst sensation of his life. Some of the fog covered his mouth as his body burned and his body was aching to be free. It hurts. Make it stop. The boy's yells were unheard. Shala's base. So is everyone here? Asked Shala as she looked at everyone before smiling. Then I'll tell you the plan one more time so that you don't forget it. Before she could start, all of them heard light snoring. They looked at the source and Shala developed a tick in her eyebrow as they saw Blair, in her cat form, sleeping without a care. Blair! Cried out the witch. WHA cried out the Nikomata, looking around before realizing where she was in. Sorry? Can we get on with my plan? Spoke Shala with her arms crossed while tapping her foot on the ground. Her answer was several nods. Good. Grinned the witch. First, on the exact date, our new comrade Fred will use his powers involving Maba's Eye to seal all meisters and weapons alongside Lord Death. Got it, Fred? Shala asked at the end to the new member. Got it. Nodded the older man with the prison jumpsuit on him. He was free, a werewolf that was in jail because of his crime of attempted assassination of the head witch Maba, yet he could only take one of her eyes. Next, me, Mifune, and Blair will go underground to try and free the Kishin. She replied, pointing to the other two. They nodded before Angela asked, what about me? I'm going to have you be lookouts since it will be very dangerous around there. Angela pouted before nodding, much to Mifune's relief. Any questions? She asked, looking around. What if some meisters and weapons manage to escape? Asked a brown/blonde-haired man with red eyes, sharp teeth, pale skin, and wearing a white fur jacket with black pants and shoes. Then we will have to fight them. Replied Shala with a dark grin. I like that answer, boss. Grinned the man known as Jericho. In the meantime, train here and be ready for when the day comes. Ordered Shala. All right. Everyone said at once. As they departed to go train, Shala grinned to herself. Soon, you will regret what you did, you shitty reaper. Chuckled to herself the witch before adopting a loving look, and you won't have to be among those fakers, dear nephew. Maba's room, Nyama. Muttered the strongest witch with narrowed eyes upon feeling a disturbance. Something bad is about to happen. Thought the eldest witch. She just hoped that it wouldn't bring destruction to anyone innocent. Medusa, be careful. She thought before closing her eyes to resume mediation. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video, guys. Let me know in the comment section how was the story. And also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.